Most people think interior design is a subjective art form, that it's all about vibes or having an innate eye for color. But if you sit down with a high-level designer, you'll realize very quickly that great rooms are built on a foundation of math and physics. There is a measurable architecture to atmosphere. The reason you walk into a luxury hotel lobby or a high-end home and instantly feel settled isn't an accident. It's because the designer followed a set of non-negotiable fundamental rules that govern how humans experience space. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on the invisible fundamentals of aesthetics. We aren't talking about which throw pillow is trending this week. We are talking about the bedrock principles, the specific inches, the visual weight, and the financial strategies that apply whether you're decorating a studio apartment or a sprawling estate. Let's start with the concept of intentionality. In the design world, intentionality is just a fancy word for controlling where your eye goes. If you don't give the eye a map, it gets tired, and a tired eye leads to a viewer feeling anxious or bored in a space. This starts with the rule of focal points. Most beginners know they need a hero in the room, a fireplace, a massive window, or a bold piece of art. But the biggest mistake I see is people stopping there. They pour 90% of their energy into that one spot, creating a visual vacuum. The rest of the room feels like an afterthought, or worse, it feels empty. Every room should have one primary focal point and two secondary focal points, not 10, not one lonely hero, 3 points of visual gravity. Think of it like storytelling. The main character is your primary focal point. The secondary focal points are supporting characters. If you only have one strong character, the story feels flat. If you have too many, it's overwhelming. Your eye needs somewhere to land, somewhere to rest, and somewhere to move next. Imagine a living room with a beautiful fireplace. That's your primary focal point. Now, here's the mistake I often see. People build a busy gallery wall around it. They add decor everywhere. Suddenly, nothing is special anymore. My eyes are ping-ponging around the room and I feel stressed and I don't even know why. Instead, your first secondary focal point should be something vertical, a tall cabinet, a full-length mirror, something that balances the visual weight of the fireplace. Your second secondary focal point might be a smaller moment, maybe a sculptural object, maybe a styled side table, maybe an accent chair moment. Now your eye moves. Fireplace, mirror, sculptural, back to fireplace. It's a conversation. And when you do this, rooms suddenly feel finished, not just furnished. Finished. When you achieve this 3-point balance, the room feels solved. Nothing feels forgotten, and your secondary points actually serve to highlight the primary one by providing a visual palette cleanser. Now, we have to talk about the part no one likes to discuss, but everyone needs to hear: the financial structure of design. Designing a home is one of the biggest investments you'll ever make, and without a framework, it's very easy to waste money on things that won't matter in 3 years. I like to use the 70-30 rule, and I've talked about this in a previous video before. 70% of your pieces should be timeless, and 30% should be trendy. The 30% is your permission slip to be playful without being reckless. That 70% is where your forever money goes. We're talking about the large, heavy, expensive items. Flooring, custom cabinetry, your primary sofa, the dining table. These pieces should be classic in shape and neutral in material. They're the bones that will survive 5 different style iterations of your life. If you spend your big ticket budget on a super trendy, curved emerald green boucle sofa, you've just committed 70% of your design capital to a look that has a very clear expiration date. Instead, buy the timeless linen sofa and use the 30%, the pillows, the art, the lamps, the rugs, to bring in that emerald green or that trendy texture. You can swap a rug in 20 minutes. You cannot swap a kitchen island in an afternoon. And look, if you love the curved emerald green boucle sofa and you don't think you can live without it, then go for it. But just know the trade-off. If this way of thinking about design as a structured professional system rather than a series of random guesses excites you, that's exactly what I teach. Most people think you need to go back to school for 4 years to become an interior designer, but I've built a 6-figure career in interior design and a coaching program that proves otherwise. I help aspiring interior designers master these blueprints and turn their passion into a business without the academic fluff. If you want to see how that works, there's a link in the description to my Aspiring Interior Designer Blueprint program. But for now, let's get back to the measurements that make or break your layout. Let's get into the hard math. There are some specific numbers that, if missed, makes a room feel instantly amateur. For example, the 18-inch coffee table rule. The distance between the edge of your seating and your coffee table must be 18 inches, not 12, not 24. There's a functional reason for this that goes beyond looks. At 18 inches, you have just enough room for a human to walk through without turning sideways, which is the flow factor. But it's close enough that you can set down a glass of water without leaning your entire torso forward, which is the reach factor. It's an ergonomic rule disguised as a style rule. If you find your gap is too big, the solution is usually one of two things. Either your coffee table is too small for the scale of the room, or you've fallen into the perimeter trap. Most beginners push all their furniture against the walls because they think it makes the room look bigger. It doesn't. It just makes the room look like a waiting room. Don't judge me though. I don't have a choice because we live in one of the most expensive cities in the world and I gotta work with what I've got. But if you have the space for it, pull that furniture in. Create a conversation island. When you respect that 18-inch gap, the furniture starts communicating and the room feels intimate and expensive. Intimacy isn't just about the coffee table. It's also about how we move around the table when we're eating. Have you ever been at a dinner party where every time someone stands up, their chair legs get caught on the edge of a too small rug? The hard rule here is the 30-inch runway. Your rug needs to extend 30 inches past the table on all sides. It sounds like a lot of rug, but it's what allows the chair to glide out while staying on the same level. No tripping, no wobbling, just seamless movement. And while we're at the table, look up. If you have a pendant light, is it hanging in no man's land? Most people hang their lights way too high because they're afraid of someone hitting their head. But unless you're planning on dancing on the table, your light should be exactly 30 to 36 inches above the surface. This creates a cone of intimacy. It keeps the light focused on the people and the plates, making the rest of the room fade into a cozy background. It's a literal spotlight for your life. Moving from the floor to the walls, let's talk about the dreaded gallery wall. I see people struggle with this constantly, and the issue is almost always the negative space. When you're hanging a collection of art, you have to treat the entire group as one single object. To do that, the spacing between frames needs to be tight, usually between 2 and 3 inches. When frames are 2 inches apart, the human brain groups them together as a unit. If you spread them out to 5 or 6 inches, that grouping breaks. The pieces start to look like individual items floating aimlessly on a vast sea of drywall. It creates visual anxiety. On the flip side, if they're less than 2 inches apart, they start to feel cluttered and heavy. That 2 to 3 inch sweet spot is what gives a gallery wall that curated designer look. If you're looking at your gallery wall right now and it feels messy, get your tape measure out. Tightening those gaps is the fastest way to level up your gallery wall. As we move into the more fluid principles, we have to talk about pattern and texture. This is where a room gets its personality, but it's also where things can go south very quickly. Mixing patterns isn't about matching colors, it's about varying scales. If you have 3 small-scale floral patterns in a room, it will look like a grandmother's attic. You need a recipe. The professional trio for pattern is 1 organic, like a floral or a botanical, 1 geometric, like a stripe or a grid, and 1 solid. I know a solid isn't technically a pattern, but in design, we do treat it as one because it's the visual anchor. If you have a floral wallpaper and a geometric rug, your sofa must be a solid texture. Without that solid, there is nowhere for the eye to rest. Also, remember that pattern can be architectural. A herringbone floor, linear stitching on a sofa, or a coffered ceiling is all a pattern. If you have a lot of hard patterns in the architecture, keep your soft patterns, like pillows and curtains, more subdued. I'm going to be a bit of a tough love friend here for a second. If your furniture came as a matching set, you need to break it up. This is non-negotiable. Buying the package deal at a big box furniture store, the matching sofa, love seat, and recliner, or the matching bed, dresser, and nightstand is the fastest way to make a home feel like a motel room. It signals a lack of curation. It tells the world you walked into a store and said, I'll take whatever's on the floor. Design is about the mix, not the match. Things should look like they belong together, but they shouldn't look like they were born in the same factory on the same day. If you have a matching set, move the dresser to another room. Use a different nightstand. Mix a vintage wooden chair with a modern metal desk. The friction between different styles and eras is where style actually lives. The only place I allow matching is with nightstands or lamps for the sake of symmetry, but even then, you need to vary the art or the styling on top of them. To make mixing feel less intimidating, I want you to focus on 3 specific pairings of opposites that every pro uses. Shiny versus matte. If every surface is high gloss, polished marble, chrome, lacquered wood, the room feels cold and clinical. You need to balance that shine with matte textures like linen, raw wood, or unpolished stone. The matte materials absorb light while the shiny ones reflect it. You need both to create depth. Angles versus curves. If everything in your room is rectangular, the rug, the sofa, the coffee table, the windows, the space feels rigid and stiff. It feels like a 2D drawing. You need to break those lines with a round coffee table, a curved back armchair, or a circular mirror. Contrast in shape makes each piece pop. Old versus new. This is my favorite rule. A room with only new furniture feels like a catalog. It has no soul. Whereas a room with only old furniture can feel like a museum or a thrift shop. The magic is in the handshake between the two. Pairing a sleek modern sofa with an antique Turkish rug or a vintage wooden stool is how you create a space that feels collected over time rather than bought in a weekend. Finally, let's talk about the 3 texture rule. This is the secret weapon for anyone who loves a neutral or monochromatic palette. If you've ever seen a white on white room that looks stunning, it wasn't because of the color, it was because of the texture. To make a room feel finished, you need at least 3 distinct textures. Something hard, like metal or glass, something soft, like fabric or wool, and something organic, like wood, stone, or leather. Think about a living room, a velvet sofa, soft, a brass lamp, hard, and a marble coffee table, organic. Even if all 3 of those things are the exact same shade of cream, the room will feel expensive because light hits velvet differently than it hits marble. If everything is the same smooth polyester material, the light just falls flat and the room feels cheap. When in doubt, add a texture, not a color. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the invisible 18-inch reach factor to the 70-30 financial split that keeps your home from feeling dated. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that design is not a mystery. It's a series of intentional choices based on how we move and how we see. The most beautiful homes in the world aren't beautiful because the owners spent the most money. They're beautiful because they followed the rules of scale, balance, and texture. Go grab your tape measure, check your coffee table gap, look at your 70-30 split, and once you start seeing these invisible rules, you can never unsee them. And that's when you truly start designing. If you want to take this further and turn these principles into a career, click that link below and let's get to work. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!